Well, that's a great question. Who is Bob? And still asking that question because this is a very mysterious world. And, what brought me to meditation many years ago was the awareness that of change, of death. And it was actually when I was 4 years old, I had my first realization that I was going to die and that everyone was going to die and that it could happen at any moment. And I remember telling my mother about this, and she said that don't worry, it's not going to happen for a long time. And somehow she was trying to address maybe that I was scared. And at that point, I wasn't as much scared, even though thinking about death definitely was a powerful understanding. But I mean, I just knew what I knew, and that was that everything would change, that I would die, everyone would die, and I knew that she actually wasn't fully telling me the truth, and I don't hold it against her. But that was a very powerful realization at 4 years old, and then actually by the time I was 9, I lost a younger brother that I shared a room with. He died of an illness, and my grandfather who lived downstairs died, and then across the street, my best friend Ellen, who I played with every day, she went into a diabetic coma, and she died. And so from an early age, I had a lot of awareness of death. And I really think it was those experiences that brought me onto the path after many years of being very lost. Yeah, it was and is. Definitely. And, I think through all these years of practice, you know, I, the meditation practice has been of enormous support in helping to face and meet change. And also, I think the importance of love, and that love is stronger than fear, and to lean into love. What is love? That's another great question. And to me, I mean, yes, there's the love that can be in relationship and families and political reasons and all types of things. So there's many different facets of love. But when I'm speaking about love, maybe I'm speaking about benevolence. Or there's actually in there's a beautiful translation of loving kindness that speaks about that which softens the hardened heart. And I like that as a translation, that which softens the hardened heart. But it's a general, like a feeling of goodwill, of great kindness, respect, and not just for one individual, but for everyone, and not just for even one species, but for all species. So just as much as I have a right to be here in this world, and you have a right to be here in this world, even the mosquitoes, that they have a right to be here in this world too, and that all of the sentient creatures are no more so and no less so important as anyone else. But sometimes we like to think that we're um, more superior, but in some ways, like all life treasures life. All life wants to live. It doesn't want to die. It fears death and doesn't want to have pain. And so the part of the love we talk about is a love of the sacredness of all life, the reverence of all beings. That each of us wants to be happy, to be healthy, to be free of pain and suffering. So that type of love. The teachings of Jesus and Mary were all about love. Love, don't hurt your enemy. Love your enemy. So it's that type of a very goodwill that's beyond. So it's a type of love that goes beyond religion, because sometimes even religion, though, makes separation, or political parties make separation. But we're not talking about that type of a universal. We try, and It's not easy, and I'm aware in this particular province there's some interest of another area that wants to have their own country, and so some people like this is wonderful, and some people know this is not good, and so the ways of the world, it's endless, the amount of division and separation and so forth. But we want to look at the common humanity. So if a car has a crash, do I ask that person whether they're for Catalonia or not? I don't ask that question. I go in. If that's Trump in the car, do I say? Do I say? Do you vote a Republican? If you're a Republican, I'm not going to help you. If you're in a car crash, so we talk about helping to have this goodwill towards all beings, and not so easy. That would be a wonderful way. Yeah, and of course, and when we say teacher, because anywhere where I'm personally getting activated, it's easy to put the blame on them or someone else, but can I take responsibility for my own activation and investigate it deeply into what is actually causing my activation? That somehow I'm separating myself from them, and that there's often a place of fear and a place of sadness that's there, a place of unawareness that's there. And if I can see that, then I can begin to see, oh, just like me, this person also wants to be happy, and they want to be safe and secure and find the common ground that we share as a human. Well, yeah, there's not a general
No.
not a general way, but you know, I want to try to be honest, and part of in living my life, and it's not easy, I aspire to want to live undefendedly, and many of us live defendedly, and so I'm aspire for the opposite, to be undefended. And sometimes it might be that I have to tell the truth, that I'm what's being said here is feeling hard for me, and I see that I have some feelings about it, and at least we can understand that together, so that I don't have to close my heart to them. But I also feel that it's important also at the same time to honor our truth, because recently there's some things that came up in my life that I really chose to not take sides. I was asked to take side on a certain situation, and I really couldn't. And there was a fear. It was a fear for me to tell one of the sides that I couldn't take sides, because then I thought maybe they wouldn't like me, because I like you if you're on my side. If you're not on my side, then I don't know. But I was witnessing and talking to both sides, and I had compassion and understanding for both sides, and so therefore I couldn't take one side. But it was scary to say, um, to let one of the sides know, because I saw that what came up at me was the fear that maybe they wouldn't like me anymore, or this or that. But then I realized more deeply that if I sold out on what my whole heart was saying, if I didn't live that, then I'm selling out on myself, and that would be more difficult to live with. And so, but I try to convey in heartfelt language why I could not take sides, and I had to say some very painful things for people to understand. I wasn't living with the integrity, with my own heart. So sometimes I think that approach of working with those that you don't see the same way. How do we begin to communicate mindfully? So again, it involves listening and understanding and being sensitive, because the practices of mindfulness is good for ourselves and working inside ourselves, but then how we are with others, our relational mindfulness, and to listen and to understand their hearts. So not easy, not a general thing, but to try to understand. I try to take ownership of my own greed, hatred, and ignorance, my own views. Jill, I agree with you so much that the children are our future. And I've noticed in the world, as mindfulness has grown exponentially around the world, that there's a lot of interest in bringing mindfulness with children. I think it's wonderful. And, and to be in touch with ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, being able to respond in more healthy ways when there's conflict rather than reactive ways that can bring about a lot of pain. And also, of course, with the mindfulness, there's recognitions of the importance of our emotional intelligence, not putting people down, really being, people have different ways of seeing and trying to understand rather than to. So these are very important aspects. And, our children, as you said, are our hope for the future. And children are watching very closely how their mummies and daddies are acting. And they're also copying them to some degrees. And so, as much as we want to have emphasis on helping our children, we also have to help ourselves in this. I remember one time yelling at my younger son to stop yelling at my other son. And then I thought, I wonder where he learned to yell. Or one time, my son was slammed the cabinet, and I was telling my wife about that, and she said, "Well, a little while ago, I got kind of upset with something, and I slammed the cabinet." So really, we were saying like monkey see, monkey do, and so it made me realize just how important. Like our children, they're watching us very closely, and they're seeing us how we meet difficult situations and so forth, and so. Yes, the children are our future, and we are part of that, helping them to form their future by how we are relationally with them as well now. And so the importance in our own practices in helping to support our children to find ways of resolving conflict in healthier ways. So, so I want to say the responsibility of helping to mindfully support our children is a family affair with the parents as well as with the children, or with our teachers, or we can say with the adults and with the children, and because they're observing us on how we resolve conflict. And of course, most children that have access to televisions and the internet are seeing tremendous amounts of violence and oppression against women as sexual objects, and race and ethnicity. We are being bombarded with all of this media that is really disturbing. And so, what children are growing up with is huge. And the access to seeing anything under the sun is so easy, even more so. I mean, when I grew up, there was 3 television stations. If you were lucky enough to have a television, and then that became more prevalent, and then people could get a color television. But now you don't even, so just the amount of information that children have is enormous. And so, how do we resolve conflict if what we see in our media is violence? And so they're up against a lot. And so again, I think bringing a sense of social justice into our schools, into our homes, bringing the sense of where the school that my kids went to, we were very much into no put downs. It was kind of like against our culture to put down anyone else, and we would have to discuss it when someone felt little, someone felt shame, someone felt humiliated. Then we would talk, and we'd be able to try to work out the feelings with one another. So. Yes, our children are our future, and they are the seeds, and they are up against so much more than even our generation of the amount of violence that is seen. And so the internet is based on popularity, not on truth. And so that's further even like what type of influence does that have on our larger society? Because whatever comes, people pay. Google Ads is about paying money so you can get on top of that list. And so, what type of implications does this have for our children and our culture when it's not based on truth, it's based on popularity? So I have a lot of concerns about those types of things and how that has an influence with our children, our culture, and our life. So how do we be wise with it, and how do we, begin to have conversations with our children, or in schools have conversations about the use of the internet and our technology, and the amount of what is this phenomenon about taking pictures of yourself all the time? Selfies. Yeah, and so what is that about? And yet we see the incidence of cutting is growing, the incidence of feeling even though we're connected through social media and the internet, we don't even know the person next to us. And people can go out for you go to a cafe, and all the young kids and sometimes older ones were all on the cell phone, talking with somebody else, while with people here that we could be talking with. Actually, Judd Brewer at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, he wrote a book called The Craving Mind, and he's been doing some very interesting research, as well as others, like looking at the type of chemical effects, like when you get an email, when you get a text, and this little thing, that produces a chemical inside, an opioid. It feels good, and I want more. But the thing is, it lasts for a little bit, but then it goes away. But then the craving arises. I need to get another one. I need to get another one. I need to get another one. It's endless. And I think the teachings in mindfulness is really helping us to be able to investigate like this longing for pleasure. Like, yes, human beings, we long for pleasure, but where is happiness found? Is it found inside or outside? And so these are challenges to live with. And I think the meditation practice really beginning to help us investigate more closely yes, there's a longing for us as humans to have happiness, but where is it to be found? Is it to be found inside or outside? The technology is fabulous. I mean, when I was younger, and I was studying with teachers in Burma, in order for me to communicate whether I could come to Burma to go to the monastery, I'd have to write an aerogram. I mean, maybe if I'm mentioning the word aerogram, some people don't even know what that is. It's a very thin piece of paper, and it was a letter you could write and send. It was reasonably cheap to send it, much more cheaper than writing a letter. An aerogram is called, but it would take a month to get to Burma, and it would take another month to come back. Now I can send an email and find out in a second. And so I just want to say that some of the uses of our technology is wonderful. How that I can have a Skype call in Burma today, where 20 years, 25 years, 30 years ago, I would have to write a letter and it would take a month to get there. And so there is what is our wise, like the use of our technology? What is a wise use of it? I don't think that we can get them to meditate by us telling them or forcing them. It's got to be by love, or by sometimes not even words. And if they see that you've gone on a meditation retreat, or that you've been practicing meditation and you're now a kinder, more understanding mom, like, hey, that's what's going on here. I mean, because they know you and they know how you were and they know how you are now, and it's like, oh, this is something for me. So I think that our actions speak louder than words. But also, I think that I don't know. It's kind of funny to say, but sometimes people will ask me, "Well, do your children meditate?" And they both do now. My younger one actually is more involved than my older one, but they both are. But I used to say early on, when they weren't, like they hadn't suffered enough about life, and it's like only like through some type of realizing life is not all wonderful that you begin to want to look inside. And so that part is important too, the understanding the developmental phases. And but I think for us, being an example can do a great thing. And I think The technology and everything too is taking us away from the natural world. So that's another thing we miss being in the world. I mean, the world can bring up our natural meditation. You go for a walk, or you stop and you listen to the winds. I mean, we're in such a beautiful environment right now. It's very inviting for us to get close to ourselves and close to like being in the earth instead of being behind a screen. Like to be to me, one of the biggest concerns is that we're losing our touch with the natural world. Maybe we'll get some answers along the way, but our willingness to sit with not knowing, to open our hearts, and to get in touch once again with the natural world, which is a powerful, powerful teacher. And yes, our technology is great, and may we use it wisely and not get lost in it. All of a sudden, hours go by. Yeah, I have a friend of mine. She's a meditation teacher, and she also works in a school with young kids, so an early age school. But what she does, she lives in the forest, and she collects dead animals, and she puts them in her freezer. So be careful if you ever go in her freezer. Be careful. Like this ice cream is right next to a dead squirrel. But she keeps she's got a lot of dead animals, and she'll hold a class with the kids, and she'll bring them all in and put them on a blanket, and let the kids look at. She doesn't have them touch them, but just to look at all the like from dead bugs to different types of animals, and to begin to explore the conversation of death. And the kids are just really fascinated. It's really a powerful way to begin to introduce that as a topic. And we can't provide an artificial answer because they know. Just like my mother said to me, "Don't worry, you won't die death won't happen for a long, long time." I know she was just trying to comfort me. I have nothing. I don't hold it against her, but I also knew it wasn't fully the truth. And so when my sons were young and they started, asking about death, we talk with them. We still talk with them about it. My son's, my younger one is 21 years old, and he was lying in bed with my wife and I just a few days ago, and he was just saying, "I don't want you and Mommy to die. I just don't know what I'd do without you guys." And we were just saying, well, we want to live as long as we can. And I know one day we'll be separated. And it's just these painful, tender moments of us just being together. And just, one day this will be otherwise. And I always say, we will be separated physically one day, but we'll always be together in our hearts. But that's right, the physical separation will be there. And hopefully me before you, I'll say to my son. Our bodies are made of atoms, and when they die, these atoms don't get destroyed. They just get shifted. One poet writes about maybe some of those atoms will end up on a beautiful bird, on a wing of a beautiful bird. Maybe other atoms will be on a broccoli. Maybe other atoms will fall and become part of a tree. And some of the atoms might begin to just float up into the sky, back to the stars from whence they came, because exploding stars, supernovas, is what creates the atoms. And so she ends their poem by saying, "So long as there is a universe, I am a part of it." And so that is a very beautiful, So yes, there's the breakup of this body, but the building components that make up this body, they might end up in the grass here. They might end up part of that the tripod. I mean, who knows? I mean, and so that's why some of the spiritual mystics, Ramana Maharshi was one of them, 20th century, and when he was dying, some of his students were saying, "Please don't go, please don't go." And evidently he told them, "Well, where am I going? I ain't going anywhere." And so there's also that type of an expanded understanding. Where am I? I'm not going anywhere. These atoms are here. They just change. In a whole world that is idolizes the sense of self, an individual. And I think it's part of our natural developmental phase to develop into identity and to individuate and separate from mommy and daddy and to be ourselves. But how do we also not get so lost in that sense of self and narcissism? And the one that has an understanding that the sense of me is found everywhere rather than just in this here, there may be a little bit more space. Also, a lot more respect for all of life, because you are part of everything rather than separate from everything. So again, nature reminds us of that. You know, there is a certain value in stopping from time to time. And there's actually a Chilean poet, Pablo Neruda, and I'm sorry that I don't know Spanish. I'm sure the poem, it's called Keeping Quiet. It's much more eloquent in Spanish than it is in English. But to me, in that poem, Keeping Quiet, there's a few lines in it that to me speak about the importance of why we would stop and to meditate. Probably the most beautiful offers the beautiful reasons of why we'd meditate. And anywhere, in any literature that I found anywhere. And he says, if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps this huge silence might interrupt the sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us when everything seems to be dead in winter and later proves to be alive. And so he speaks about this importance of entering into the huge silence. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps this huge silence might interrupt the sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us when everything seems to be dead in winter and later proves to be alive. So maybe as a way that we end this interview, let's all together, wherever you are, wherever you're seeing this, let's together for a few moments enter into the huge silence to begin to understand ourselves. So thank you, and connecting with our body, our thoughts and emotions, and the natural world. Thank you and be well.